We all love our fair share of gruesome scenes, and Arcane is no exception, with some powerful, gut-wrenching gore in both on- and off-screen killings. This type of trauma resonates heavily with the audience, and is usually something that keeps us glued to the screen. Welcome to Otaku Binge. This is Arcane Moments, gruesome to most gruesome. Our first category is going to be Brawling Out, where we only count the most intense showdowns with hand-to-hand combat. First up, we have the street brawl in Episode 1. The fistfight that took place in the alleys of the Undercity between Vi and DECKARD's crew is probably the least gruesome of the scenes, although still pretty bloody and vicious, as fighting each other is just a way of survival on the streets. From Powder's perspective, and response to the brawl itself, she seemed to be pretty new to the rougher edges of what life down there seems to entail. Vander and Vi seem to have sheltered her a lot in her young years, living amongst the lanes, so the slightest glimpse of violence up close seems to catch her off guard. Maybe this is where the influence of building bombs came into play. It was altogether better to set a timer and run than stand her ground and fight with knuckles like her older sister. Next on our list is Vi and Savika's brawl in Episode 5. At one point, JINX refers to Savika as an ogre.
Savika? That ogre?
And with this scene, we very easily understand where that idea comes from. As SILCO's right hand, she's practically built to be a lean, mean fighting and killing machine. Powder's first successful bomb in Episode 3 basically kills or mutilates just about everyone on the scene. We see at the beginning of the second act that she's sporting some cloak that covers her left arm. Lo and behold, it was a mechanical replacement that pumps her with controlled doses of shimmer. These sporadic bursts of superhuman strength seem to give Savika this type of roid rage during the showdown between her and Vi, at the end of Episode 5 in the second act. Rounding out this category, we have the showdown between EKKO and JINX'S. It was a little uncomfortable to watch two childhood friends beat the life out of each other in a fight to survive. But when they showed a broken JINX, you could almost see the little powder inside that was just doing what she was poisoned to do. Although she ended the scene with a bang, pun intended, you can't help but feel sorry for her and all of the tormenting influences that pushed her to become the embodiment of chaos. Getting a little more grisly and serious with our scenes, the wartime efforts category contains what it takes for opponents to survive through warfare. From full-on firefight combat to covert operations, and even biochemical mutations. Our first entry for this tier is the opening scene of the series. Red smoke, the hazy fog of war, warn building structures that stand high into the sky above, as an uprising ensues below. We eventually see that it was Powder who was lulling the children's tune across the river with her eyes covered as Vi led the way through the fallout. This scene becomes slightly gruesome when we see bodies being tossed from explosions. And it only gets more dramatic as the wandering sisters stumble upon an altered Vander, hardened by the recent battle. To top it off, young Vi and the toddler Powder behold their mother slain on the bridge in the aftermath. It displays to us the horrific aftermath of war, which is a great way to kick off the series. Moving on, we have the FIRELIGHTS and JINX'S bombs in the beginning of Episode 4. When Savika and her henchmen are ambushed by the FIRELIGHTS, JINX freezing in the face of someone that looked like Vi compromises their entire supply of shimmer. But before this part of the scene unfolds, two of the ambushers trip a wire and lock themselves into one of her traps below deck. They knew right from the get-go who it was when the black lights turned on, and with a Harley Quinn-style entrance, she straps grenades on both of their backs when swinging through the galley. Next up is Progress Day's blast from Episode 4. When JINX freezes, thinking she's about to kill her sister, it brings SILCO and his henchmen to start thinking she's a weak link in their chain of command.
She's a problem and we all know it.
This pushes her to show them just how committed she is to following their agenda by starting a fire that results in a massive blast at the end of Progress Day's fair. The attack's blast almost kills Caitlyn and claims 6 lives of her fellow officers in the line of duty. The confusion allows her to escape with one of the newly refined Arcane crystals, so she can ultimately weaponize the powerful stone for SILCO in his rise to power. Further down the list, we have DECKARD and SHIMMER'S effects we see in Episode 2. It's kinda gruesome watching someone shoot up drugs, and apparently watching them ingested is no different. We first catch a glimpse of Shimmer's effects with the lab mouse going into violent agony after drinking the contaminated water. But when Silco tested it on DECKARD, his hasty chugging and ruthless vomiting of it immediately after was pretty messed up to watch. Not to mention, it continues to pour out during and after the drug's rush, leaving him a fiend for the next dose. The scene with VIKTOR, the HEXCORE, and Shimmer resembled some black magic ritual as he carved rune symbols into his braces and even his own skin. And it doesn't get any lighter when he injects himself with the Shimmer variant that was given to him by Singed. A doomed man will turn to just about anything for answers, but quite often fails to see the dangers they present to their environment when blindly pursuing greatness over goodness. Our bloodbath section is what we consider the most horrific scenes that display some sort of bloodshed on screen. Let's talk about the cat and mouse from the final scene in episode 1. When Silco learns of Vander's children and their ties to the explosion in Piltover, we're introduced to a young Singed concocting a serum. This Shimmer, as they call it, is put to the test with a cat and a mouse. And quite frankly, it doesn't turn out well for the cat. Ever wonder how terrified a cat might become after watching its food turn twice its own size and weight with 3 times the ferocity? We watch the poor thing go from hunter mindset to cowering with uncertainty. When it realizes what the heck is going on, we see through the mouse's perspective as it lunges for a terrified cat huddling up against a wall. Next, we have the execution in JINX'S. Though it was just a bad dream, for Mel, it was a haunting nightmare and memory she had to bear for most of her life. The counselor is stern about finding negotiation through diplomatic resolutions, and anchors to that belief in Piltover. But as her story shows us, these kinds of traits are signs of the weak according to her ruthless mentor and mother, Lady Medarda of JINX'S. Beheading the young princess of a fallen regime, Mel witnesses the life leave the eyes of a girl that looked no older than her. The JINX'S ruler displayed to her daughter there its unwavering assertion for political dominance through merciless bloodshed. And rounding out this category, we have the death of BENZO and GRAYSON at the end of episode 2. When enforcers Grayson and Marcus moved in to apprehend a culprit for the explosion in Piltover's academy, Vander willingly takes the fall for Vi.
You'll oblige a doomed man one last smoke.
But every bit of a peaceful transition is thrown out the window when Silco and a mutant DECKARD intercept them. This scene is pretty vicious for a couple reasons. As Grayson is horrendously killed off-screen with 3 other enforcers, BENZO is horrifically ripped apart as EKKO saw from safety, and helplessly locked away is Vi, who can only watch her father figure get his daylights brutally beaten out and hauled away. The scene ends with everyone suffering their losses, from Marcus cursing his blood-soaked coins, to Vi trapped with no way to save Vander. The Silco for Vendetta category is where we really show how much of a serpent the arch-nemesis of Arcane is. First, we have Silco stabbing Vander twice during episode 3's fight scene on the bridge. We all expected Vander to be killed off in defeat against DECKARD on the bridge, but none of us saw that slithering one-eyed snake coming from behind and putting a blade in his back. They certainly had deep-rooted resentment towards each other, but Silco was out to settle a vendetta, and his second blow, ultimately leaving Vander as dead weight to be pushed off a bridge, was bone-chillingly cold-hearted hatred. One of the most brutal scenes has to be Vander drowning Silco from time to time as flashbacks. We never see when in the story this event actually takes place, but it certainly happens before the series even begins. According to Vander, they were both respected members of the Lanes.
You had my respect. The Lane's respect.
But that wasn't enough for Silco. Instead, Silco had a dream of conquest to unite their people under a nation of Zon. But Vander couldn't follow the heinous path that his comrade was willing to take, just to achieve some twisted victory. Thus, we have one of the driving moments that brings Silco on the path of vengeance against Vander. Because they both had the same vision, but something along the way tore them apart. Maybe it was Silco turning to mad scientists and mutations that helped Vander realize how demented his brother had become. In the end, Silco attained his power by the same means that convinced DECKARD about Shimmer, by stopping at nothing to achieve it. And moving on, we have Silco being caught in the crossfire. Although he was one of the most cynical villains possible, this was a lot more meaningful than the death of a villain. If we see from JINX'S perspective, SILCO was the only mentor that entered her life and never left. She didn't just lose her boss or teacher, but lost her father. They clearly had a very close bond together through the years, no matter how poisonous he was for JINX in the destruction of Powder. SILCO even displays that he has a soft spot in his cold-blooded core.
I never would have given you to them.
And our last category is where it counts. Here, the audience sees gore through grief, either from losing a favorite character or being traumatized by how they were kept in the show. Up first, we have VIKTOR, SKYE, and the HEXCORE. This was certainly a rattling scene that would throw any man on the pursuit of discovery down a path of apathetic madness. As the HEXCORE was morphing VIKTOR further into becoming machine, his assistant, introduced to us in the second act, rushes to save him. Possibly the only time he had ever felt her embrace him, VIKTOR tried to push her away, but the intense power quickly incinerates her to ash and leaves the scientist heartbroken with loss and her notes. During the scene where SILCO bursts into Singed's lab, JINX being injected with shimmer seems to resemble something from a horror movie. As she's strapped to the surgical table, her hallucinations were pretty unsettling to say the least. Watching your own sister blow your younger self's head off had to be one of the darkest moments presented on the show. This could have very well been JINX'S inner demon, convincing her that Violet would betray her sister to protect Caitlyn. Regardless, her veins overflowing with shimmer and helpless shrieking under the doctor's lights was a graphic touch to this scene. One of the show's more harrowing scenes is with Singed, Rio, and young VIKTOR at the end of episode 6. Something about Singed perfectly captures a mad scientist. Maybe it's the voice of that tiring old man, with still so much work to do. Maybe it's his thinning facial features and his obsession with science. One thing is for certain, he flawlessly cultivates the persona of a German scientist that only survived this second war because of Operation Paperclip. The relationship between him and VIKTOR got very gruesome when VIKTOR was a boy. First meeting Rio as a beautiful salamander-like creature, he quickly admires the animal. But upon returning later one day, he discovers a sick and poisoned Rio was only a side effect for the deranged doctor trying to save her from ever dying. This one hit us in the gut when all of the testing and mutilation being done to animals across multiple industries is taken into consideration.
The mutation must survive.
And finally, we get to the deaths of VANDER, MYLO, and CLAGGOR in the final scene of episode 3. When Powder's bomb detonates from an unstable arcane crystal, it ricochets unimaginable amounts of energy and debris everywhere. Unfortunately, the blast didn't kill anyone that it was intended for. Instead, she accidentally causes the deaths of her own orphan family when a metal rod pierces through MYLO's shoulder, and the entire concrete structure collapses on both him and CLAGGOR. We get undeniable confirmation that they have certainly died when we're shown their lifeless hands sticking out from the rubble. VANDER may be able to take quite a hit, but after getting beaten up by a mutant twice, stabbed twice, survived a catastrophic blast, and ingested enough shimmer to get a second wind, the guy just couldn't take any more. After losing a good chunk of our favorite characters in one fight, we had to rate this one as the most gruesome scene in the Arcane series so far. And there you have it, Arcane's most gruesome moments from the season. Let us know in the comments section below if you agree with our ranking. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos here on Otaku Binge, where we serve up your daily cup of anime. Thanks for watching.